and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 583, and today's date is February 4th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Oil Suppression Used to Put Pressure on Russia to Abandon Support for Assad. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand the U.S. government, central bankers, and corporations, along with the EU, are trying to pass the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. They're trying to work with everyone on this. And, of course, here in the United States, they do not want Congress to read about it at all. They don't want them to even see it or be involved. They want this whole thing to stay secretive. Now, we know why this is, because it benefits corporations, it benefits the central banking system, and the wealthy who are running this country at this time. That's it. It does not benefit the people. And we see the government in Greece realizes this. The new Syriza party said, guess what? Since we hold the majority in parliament, we will never ratify the deal, the TTIP deal. And this will be a big gift not only to the Greek people, but to all of Europe. And we can see why they're doing this, because they realize this is not a benefit to the people. It is a benefit to the central bankers and to corporations. Period. And we can see that all of these bills that are being pushed to Congress is not allowed to read any of them. Look at the Patriot Act, the NDAA, Obamacare. They don't want them to read it. The TTIP, the Federal Reserve Act. We could see all of this. And if Congress does not read any of these bills, they should not be pushed forward. Actually, maybe they should be quizzed on each one of them to make sure they understand what is in each one of these. That they understand the implications to the people. But guess what? Most of the government officials today, they're not working for the people. They're working for themselves. They're working for the central bankers. They're working for corporations who put them into their positions. And this is why they don't care. And it's completely evident. Who cares what they're talking about, what they're out there promising? Take a look at their actions. Period. That's all you need to do, and you understand. Now, here in the United States, we understand the unemployment rate is completely fake, phony, and false. Even the CEO of Gallup is out there saying, yeah, this whole thing's a big lie. And we see today that ADP completely misses. We see that they are saying industries benefiting from the lower oil prices have been slower to increase their hiring. They're nervous because they know eventually these prices are going to go back up. They know this is only temporary. Now, of course, people are out there saying, no, it's going to stay this way. Well, I don't think it is. I think it's going to go right back up, or maybe even higher than what we had before. And we can see that ADP missed by about 10,000 or so. This is the lowest print in 4 months. They came in around 213,000. They were expecting about 223,000. So we can see right now, as companies continually lay off, companies are not hiring, unemployment is suffering. And this fake number that they keep throwing at us is going to continually go down because they're going to manipulate it. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep the number exactly the same or bring it one notch lower the next time it comes out. So instead of 5.6, we might see it's at 5.5. It's done time and time again. And as we know, since the beginning of this year, and right now we're in the second month of this year, we're almost up to 40,000 layoffs. And Bank of America right now is laying off 200 plus people in Norfolk, Virginia. JP Morgan Chase is laying off about 163 in Jacksonville. GE is laying off in Texas, their gas division, about 330 people. Every day we see more and more companies laying off. We understand that PayPal and eBay are going to have huge layoffs. We understand that Staples and Office Depot are making a deal where Staples is going to acquire the stores of Office Depot. And you know what happens. They close stores. People get laid off. We see that Radio Shack is going out of business. UPS right now is saying, listen, we're going to have to place a surcharge on home deliveries because 2 Christmases in a row, the holiday season, sales were awful. Package delivery, terrible. They're done with their excuses. They're just saying, listen, our profits aren't there and we need to increase the surcharges to home delivery. We see the auto industry out there telling us that, yes, auto sales are incredible. All day the mainstream media has been talking about how great the auto sales are, breaking all times of records. So there's one simple question we need to ask. When Ward released the U.S. domestic auto sales, SAAR, S-A-A-R, data this afternoon, why did it miss expectations and show a second monthly drop in a row? January printed at 13.31 million cars, missing expectations of 13.5, and dropping from December 13.46 million. So somebody, again, is fudging or lying. And we understand that these automobile companies are pushing subprime loans. Anyone that has a heartbeat can get a loan. But what we see is as more and more of these people get automobiles, the delinquency rate continually rises. I mean, we're getting close. I think we're around 80% right now, delinquency rate for automobiles. And it's getting worse as time goes on. It's not getting better. We see manufacturing falling apart. The Baltic Dry Index again has dropped once again to 569 points. Again, we see that since people have no money, and we understand that most of the people, about half of the U.S. population, lives paycheck to paycheck. They just have enough to pay for their expenses. They run out of money 21 days into the month. They have no disposable income. And we see, since they're not going out and purchasing goods from all these retail shops, we see that factories aren't producing. If factories aren't producing, they don't need the raw materials. If they don't need the raw materials, guess what? The entire system starts to collapse. Each business down the line makes less and less money. They have to lay off more people. As they lay off more people, guess what? They can't find work. Or they find part-time work. And they have no extra money to spend. It's an ongoing problem. Now we understand the BRICS, they're creating their new bank, their new development bank, which will have assets of about $100 billion. And we see that 5 of the countries need to ratify the entire system, and they're in the process of doing this right now. The Russian government has submitted a bill to Parliament to ratify the BRICS Bank. The new development bank will have assets of about $100 billion from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and it will rival the World Bank. So we can see this is going online right now. They're just waiting for the rest of the countries to ratify it, which they will, and eventually this system will go live. Now we understand S&P was sued by the U.S. government, and we understand that they lost the suit because they basically downgraded the United States. The United States got pissed off and decided to sue S&P. And we see now S&P came out and they started to downgrade all European banks. Actually, they probably should have done this a long, long time ago. And we see they've downgraded Credit Suisse, Barclays, Lloyds, Bank of Scotland, RBS, HSBC, Ulster Bank, and they have on negative watch Zentral Bank, M-Bank, Unicredit. They've also downgraded Gazprom from BBB- to BB+. And they're saying that they needed to downgrade Gazprom because of the sanctions and what is going on there. But we see, on the other hand, China's Dangong rating agency has given Gazprom the highest rating of AAA. So already we have China's credit rating agency, which they started, is giving Gazprom the highest rating, while S&P is giving them a lower rating, and we knew this was going to happen. We knew eventually there was going to be a conflict. And we can see now that obtaining such a rating as AAA by Dangong will further expand the base of investors from the Asia-Pacific region in debt instruments of Gazprom, including pension funds, insurance companies, investment funds, and banks, as well as increasing the loyalty of Asian investors in the company. Now, we have to understand the central bankers pretty much control the rating agencies, and if they get out of line, basically they bring them back into line. And they're telling them what to do across the ocean, who to downgrade and who not to downgrade. Of course, the United States cannot be downgraded whatsoever. We've seen this already. And now we're starting to see conflicts between the West and the East. Now, we understand the United States, Saudi Arabia, they have conspired together to suppress the oil prices. Now, of course, people are out there saying, no, this is absolutely ridiculous. No way have they done this. This is normal. You continually produce more and more oil when there's no demand. Does that make any sense whatsoever? If there's no demand, why do you increase production? It makes no sense. It's actually the opposite way. So what we're seeing right now is that this suppression of oil was used for many different agendas. One, to boost the economy of the United States, which it did not work. People didn't come out with their savings and they didn't go out there purchasing goods. It just didn't happen. We also understand they were putting pressure on Russia. And if we look back in time, we see that John Kerry went to Saudi Arabia on September 11th. 2014. And it's just very interesting he went on that day to negotiate a secret deal with the late King Abdullah, so as to get a green light in order to launch its airstrikes against the Islamic State, or basically go after Assad. And we can see that this was all done, and the only way they were able to do this and to get Assad to step down is they needed to put pressure on Russia. And how do you do this? By lowering the oil prices, putting the squeeze on Russia to relinquish support of Assad. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. Saudi Arabia has already tried to blackmail Russia once before to stop supporting Assad. And now we can see with the United States' help, they've made a deal to suppress oil prices, to put the squeeze on Russia so they can go after Assad. This is what it's all about. And who is involved in this? Well, Qatar, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, of course, United Arab Emirates, Israel, England, they're all part of this because they want to get into Syria. Why do they want to do this? Well, they want the country. They understand they have quite a bit of oil. They would like to set up a central bank, put all their natural reserves, natural resources on the U.S. dollar. They would also like to have a pipeline going through Syria. And what they would like to do is create a natural gas pipeline originating in Qatar and one which would terminate somewhere in Central Europe. This is the same Qatar which was the mystery sponsor of weapons and money to Syrian mercenary rebels and the Islamic State. So we can see right now they're going to put a pipeline in, and the only way to do this is to get rid of Assad, to take over this country. And how will everyone pay for this gas? Of course, U.S. dollars, going through the central bank system. And now they're in negotiation with Russia to see if they will fold. If they will say, okay, listen, we will no longer support Assad. Please raise the gas prices. Now, we see Russia has been making deals, trying to broker a peace deal between the opposition. Of course, they're trying to do everything they possibly can to help the situation. Will they completely remove support for Syria? I don't think so. Will they talk to Assad and say, listen, if you step down and we place another leader in your place, but keep everything in place and we still support Syria, is that fine? This way the oil prices can go back up. And this might be something they'll do. And we're going to have to watch this. Now, Saudi Arabia seem very confident that this will happen because OPEC is out there. The OPEC Secretary General has said, well, we're getting very close to the bottom now of oil prices, and we see a real possibility that oil prices could explode higher to upwards around $200 a barrel in the near future. So something must be in the works right now. And we can see all of this is about the main goal, and that main goal is to remove Assad from power. Now, is Russia just going to back off and say, okay, you can have Syria? I don't think this is going to happen. Will he broker a deal where he'll allow and work with Assad to have a gas line in the country? Maybe. We're going to have to watch this very carefully. But again, will the central bankers be happy with this? And I don't think they will, because they want full control. Look at Ukraine, where they took over control of the natural gas pipelines. They brought in investors into it. Biden, Kerry have family members or close friends put on the board of the directors in this country. They're going to want the same thing to happen in Syria. And if they don't have full control, anything could happen in these countries. And this is why they're pushing this so hard. And eventually what they're going to do is they're going to go into Iran. All of this is to prop up the US dollar. This is why they're doing all of this. Because they realize the system is falling apart. And listen, if war gets started by pushing Assad and Russia, so be it. They're willing to sacrifice the American people, the European people, as long as they get their way. Now we see and we hear about the RFID chip, where people have been talking about the RFID being put into humans. We already see the RFID chip is being put into the real IDs that DHS is issuing so they can track every single person. And there's a company in Sweden who is looking to inject all their workers with the RFID chip. We want to be able to understand this technology before big corporates and big government come to us and say everyone should get chipped. Hans, who believes he is preparing us for the day when the government wants everybody to be chipped, he believes that starting a voluntary program now will allow much greater knowledge later. Well, he's going to put the chip into every single person. It will allow the people in the company to gain entry to their office, get on a bus, or perhaps buy a sandwich. We're all getting used to swiping a card to do all these things, but now we're going to take it one step further and implant everyone with the chip that will do the same thing. And of course, what else does this chip hold? How do you remove it if you quit the company? What happens if it causes infection? And we know all of this is to track every single person. And we can see they are definitely pushing their agenda. We've heard about this for quite a while. And they take each step very, very slowly. First it goes into your license to track you. Then it goes into you, eventually. And this is what they're trying to do. Now, you know all those TSA people who are patting you down and checking you? Well, U.S. airports do not check the criminal history of their employees. The FBI Deputy Assistant Director of Counterterrorism, he confirmed this. The chairman of the subcommittee on the TSA, John Katko, asked U.S. transport authorities whether it was true that airports did not check the criminal history of their workers after they had passed initial background checks. And it is true, so all these people and all the people patting you down and all the security, basically, they don't even check their own people. So you don't know who they are. Now, as we know, illegals are continually coming across the border. We understand they're getting benefits, they're getting work permits, they're getting driver's license. But something very interesting came out today from IRS. The IRS commissioner confirmed Tuesday that illegal immigrants granted amnesty from deportation under President Obama's new policies would be able to get extra refunds from the IRS for money they earned while they were working illegally. It means they can go back, amend up to 3 years of previous tax forms to claim the earned income for a tax credit. What? So they were here illegally working, and the government is going to say, okay, we're going to reward you with taxes, with extra refunds. How could this possibly be? This is just unbelievable. There are so many laws being broken right now with the illegals and with what President Obama has done. And what is Congress doing about this? Absolutely nothing. Obama is just doing whatever he wants. And of course, as we know, he is controlled by the central banking system. And this is why he's pushing this very, very hard. Now, out in Nigeria, we understand the United States government would love to get into Nigeria. They've been trying. They placed Boko Haram there, a terrorist group. They were telling the Nigerian government, we need to come in and help you. And the Nigerian government said, absolutely not. And talks kind of broke off with the United States and Nigeria. Nigeria is very friendly and has a very good working relationship with China. So Nigeria decided, you know what? We're going to call in other countries to help us. And they called in Chad and Cameroon. And they're using ground troops, warplanes, to fight Boko Haram. And they've been pushing them back right now. They have created a different strategy to go after this terrorist group. And we can see hundreds of Boko Haram fighters were driven out of many, many towns. And the forces are growing and they're pushing the terrorist group back. And eventually, they will get rid of them without the help of the United States coming in to garrison their country. Now, we understand the United States government, the central bankers, they have been trying to push regime change all around the world. We saw it in Ukraine. We see it throughout the Middle East. We see it in Africa. We see it's in process right now in China and Russia. They're pushing their agenda, and it's also in process in North Korea. Now, in Venezuela, it has been going on all this time. There is a coup underway in Venezuela. Again, Venezuela has quite a bit of oil, and the United States government central bankers would love to get their hands on the natural resources, put all of this on the US dollar to prop up the system for a little bit longer until they can get this war started. This is what they've been doing all along. All the pieces are falling into place like a bad CIA movie. U.S. has placed sanctions on Venezuela because of the protests, because they're not letting the people speak freely. Now, this is how they begin, and they do this quite a bit. Of course, they're the ones who ginned up the protests and had other people join in, and this is what they do. They're doing it in China with the Umbrella Revolution, which kind of died out. They've done it in Ukraine. They've done it through the Middle East. And we can see that the corporate media plays this up. This week, the New York Times showcased an editorial degrading and ridiculing Venezuela President Maduro, labeling him erratic and despotic. 2 days later, the New York Times ran a front-page piece shaming the Venezuelan economy and oil industry, predicting its downfall. Now we have the story that Venezuela has a nuclear weapon and a plan to bomb New York City. U.S. scientists jailed for trying to help Venezuela build a bomb. This was on January 30th of 2015. News propaganda headlines lead readers to believe Venezuela was directly involved in a terrorist plan against the U.S., but the actual text of the article makes clear that no Venezuelans were involved at all. The whole charade was an entrapment set up by the FBI. And we've seen this done many, many times. The same day, State Department spokesman Jen Psaki condemned the alleged criminalization of political dissent in Venezuela. This February marks 1 year since anti-government protests violently tried to force President Maduro's resignation, and opposition groups are currently trying to gain momentum to reignite the demonstrations once again. As shortages continue and access to the dollar becomes increasingly difficult, chaos and panic ensue, and this is what the U.S. government central bankers do. They destroy the economy of the country, making the people rise up. And of course, they drive the entire thing by placing agent provocateurs inside the country. The social disconnect is capitalized on by U.S. agencies and anti-government forces in Venezuela, pushing for regime change. A very similar strategy was used in Chile to overthrow socialist President Salvador Allende. First, the economy was destroyed, then mass discontent grew, and the military moved to oust the president. And all of this was backed by Washington at every stage. And we're seeing the same exact thing happen now. Now, we understand Russia and Turkey, they are creating the Turkish Stream. This is the new pipeline to deliver Russian natural gas to Turkey and southern European customers. Greece is part of this, and they're going to make a lot of money off of this. And this is going to go live in 2016 of December. So they're building it right now. They're putting all the pieces together, and this is going to supply southern Europe because they want to get away from Ukraine. And then the pipeline will be extended throughout. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to separate themselves from the Western central bank countries. And all the government officials who invested, and all the other countries that are investing in the pipeline in Ukraine, minus Russia because they're not allowed to invest in there, they're going to find out that this was going to be a very, very poor investment when the gas is limited and most of the people are going through Turkey, going through Greece and other countries. And their entire plan for Ukraine has fallen apart. But again, if that happens, you know what they're going to do. They're going to continually provoke until they get a war started, because things, when they don't go their way and the entire system collapses, they will push war. And this is why they're pushing war right now, because things are not going their way. Now, Ukraine is out there, and they are saying they intend to decrease the share of Russian gas coming into their country, and they're going to increase the reverse supply from Europe. And this is coming from Yatsenyuk because they want to get off. They don't want to be dependent on Russia anymore. And they're trying to do everything they possibly can to do this, and this is why they have the reverse gas supplies increasing and the gas from Russia decreasing, because they don't want to be dependent on them whatsoever. Now, the EU seems to have pressured Kiev to sign an association deal. Nikolai Azarov said he was reportedly told by European commissioners that if we did not sign the accord, then it would be signed by another government official. And what they mean by this is that they'll replace the government and they'll have someone else sign it. And he said, I never once heard Putin telling me that if I did not sign off on the agreement, we would have a different cabinet and a different president. But this is exactly what I heard from European commissioners. Ukraine signed the EU association agreement in Brussels on June 27th. The bulk of the accord took effect on November 1st. And, of course, this is what the coup d'etat was all about. Back then, the Ukrainian government was going towards Russia. The United States, the EU, very angry about this, that they weren't choosing the EU. And we could see why they didn't. When you looked at Europe, you saw all these countries in debt, austerity, no economic growth. Why wouldn't they go with Russia? But again, they were angry about this, and they started a regime change to fix the problem. And this is why we're in the situation that we're in right now. Now, protesters in Kiev, they're continually storming the government buildings, and the protesters are handing over their call-up notice to President Poroshenko. And of course, Poroshenko is nowhere to be found He's off someplace else, but the protesters are angry. They don't want to be drafted. And it's getting worse and worse inside Ukraine. And we can see that Poroshenko is getting very nervous. The central bankers are getting very nervous. And they need to push the war forward before they have some type of overthrow. And we can see that John Kerry now is flying into Kiev to meet with Poroshenko. And of course we know why this is happening. Because they're going to push the war agenda. The offensive is on. The war is on. And they need a government official there to tell them, push this war. And this is exactly what's going to happen. Now, out in Yemen, we understand the government has fallen. We realize now that the people of Yemen have taken over the country. And we see the U.S. is very nervous about the situation. They have 2 warships standing by. The embassy has been evacuated. And the drone attacks are in flux right now. And we see that the U.S. military is unable to monitor the vast arsenal it has spent years providing to the Yemeni puppet government. They don't know where about $400 million worth of weapons are at this point. And this would include surveillance equipment, night vision gear, helicopters, military radios, machine guns, you name it. They have no idea where it is at this point. So we can see the situation there is getting worse and worse. And we understand out in Libya, it is getting worse. And the U.S. government is getting ready, getting prepared to go into both of these countries. And we can see in Libya, as the situation gets worse, the U.S. government, the central bankers are looking at the situation and saying, if Libya, the people of Libya and the people of Yemen get their hands on the oil fields and they start selling this oil, not using the dollar, this is when we're going to have to make our move. They did it back in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was in there selling the oil, not using the U.S. dollar. They did this in Libya with Gaddafi, who was not selling the oil using the dollar. Once this happens, all bets are off and they're going in. Well, we already see gunmen have stormed the Al Mabrook oil field in central Libya, and they have taken over that area. Now, of course, the puppet government forces are trying to fight back. And of course, they're saying, oh, the Islamic State, they have just captured Libya's biggest oil field. Well, no, it is really the people. They're using the Islamic State so they can go back into Libya. This is the whole point. The government official, the puppet government official, is in the United States right now pleading its case how the Islamic State is invading Libya and we need your help. And also, while you're there, can you put us back in power and get rid of the people that have caused all this? Basically, that is what's happening right now. And we can see the situation in the Middle East is getting worse and worse, and the coalition is starting to break apart. And this is why they've been using terrorism to bring the coalition back, because they're getting ready for a major offensive, and they don't want all these countries breaking off. Now, we understand out in Jordan, the Islamic State burnt one of their pilots that was captured. And I want to thank all those people who sent me the link. Thank you very much. I've been looking at the video and I'm still analyzing. I mean, to me right now, it does look real, but I'm not too sure about it, and I'm still looking at the situation. But it doesn't really matter at this point in time, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep the coalition completely together. They're getting them ready for a major offensive. A lot of the countries are tired of doing this already. They want to break free of this coalition. But we see right now that Jordan is receiving about $1 billion from the U.S. The United States signed a memorandum of understanding with Jordan to significantly increase financial assistance to that country in the next 3 years. This memorandum of understanding reflects the intention to increase U.S. assistance to the government of Jordan from $660 million to $1 billion per year. So we can see right now they're using terror, giving them money as long as they stay in the coalition. Jordan is out there saying we're going to intensify our role in the anti-Islamic State coalition. They brought them back in, just like they brought France back in, just like they have Australia in, Canada in. They're trying to keep everyone in on this coalition. Jordan's battle against the Islamic State, no longer someone else's war. We're going full force. They're even hinting that they're going to put troops on the ground in Syria to fight the Islamic State. This is what they want. Their goal is to get Assad, period. United Arab Emirates, they're out there saying, well, wait a minute. Whoa. We're going to hold back right now. We're going to stop flying our planes. We're a little bit nervous about pilots getting captured. And again, we don't even know who this group was that actually captured the pilot. Yes, they're telling us the Islamic State, but they tell us a lot of things, and there's absolutely no proof. We know the video came from SITE. Rita Katz, SITE Intelligence Group. They put out a lot of propaganda, a lot of fake videos. So we have to look at this and try to understand, was this really the Islamic State? Or was this someone else showing us something that would bring all these countries back and to scare the rest of the world? Because we don't know for sure it was the Islamic State. They're telling us this, but they tell us a lot of things. Doesn't mean it's true. And actually, most of the things they tell us are not true. And the United Arab Emirates are saying that, we're a little nervous about this. We might hold off, but don't worry. If they don't snap in line, there could be a terrorist type of thing happening to them very shortly. Now, there is a report submitted to the United Nations Security Council by UN observers in the Golan Heights over the past 18 months, and we discussed this once before, but now it's actually submitted. They're saying that the Israeli Defense Forces have been in regular contact with Syrian rebels and the Islamic State militants. Citing the UN report, there have been several instances detailed in the report that shows close ties between these groups. Now, we know for a fact that yes, the Islamic State was created and controlled by the US, by Israel, UK, and other nations. They're funded, they're trained, they receive their weapons from the United States. And we can see that yes, this is a proxy army to go into Syria. The Free Syrian Army, it was not working. They tried it for many, many years. They needed something better, stronger, that didn't report to any type of government, that was a terrorist group where they could do anything they possibly wanted to do without getting into trouble with the UN, because they couldn't do anything because they're a terrorist group. They couldn't do anything to any country. And this is why they needed them. And we know that, yes, this is exactly what's going on here. They need to get into Syria, and they're going to push and push until they get there, even if it leads to war. Now, Kerry is out there, and he's saying that the United States pledges to prevent the Islamic State from expanding to any new countries. Well, the Islamic State is only used to those countries where the United States needs to get back into, and into those places where they want to get into. That's Syria and Iran. So they're really not going to be spread any other place. Of course, they're spreading to Afghanistan because they want to get back into there. But they're not going to end up going to Australia to set up a base. No, it makes no sense. So his statement is actually ridiculous. The Iraqi foreign minister is out there, and he told his visiting Austrian counterpart today that the fight against the Islamic State is effectively World War III, and that all the world's major capitals are under threat. They're already acknowledging that we are headed towards World War III. Now, quite a while ago, back in June of 2013, and this is episode 95, we talked about the 10 steps to close down an open society. And this was researched by Naomi Wolf. And we went over it back in that time. And I decided, you know what, I think it's time that we take a look at this and we try to understand are we very close to the U.S. government central bankers closing down our society? And when I read through this, I was shockingly surprised. And this is why we're reviewing this today, to see how far they have come. Number 1, invoke a terrifying internal and external enemy, the Islamic State. Creating a terrifying threat, Hydra-like secretive evil, is an old trick which they use to bring people into control, to keep them afraid, to give up their rights. Have we seen this already? Yes, this is ongoing right now. And we see this at this point. Number 2, create a gulag and push torture as a good thing. Once you have got everyone scared, the next step is to create a prison system outside the rule of law. Guantanamo Bay, which is outside the rule of law. And what do they do there? They torture people. Yes, the CIA torture report was released, and it seems like they convinced the American people that it was worth it to torture these people. So it's working. And this was done back in the 1920s and 30s in Germany. The same exact procedure was done. And eventually what happens is they collect those people that are terrorists. And then eventually what happens? Citizens of the United States then are taken to this area. Those people who are not in agreement with the government. And eventually what we have is people disappearing. And we've seen they're in the first stage of this. Number 3, develop a system which creates thugs. What does that mean? Militarize police. Nationalize the police force. When leaders who seek a fascist shift want to close down an open society, they send paramilitary groups of scary young men out to terrorize citizens. What have we seen in Ferguson, at the Bundy Ranch, in New York right now, where they're creating this special forces to handle protesters? We're seeing it in New York, in every city right now, where they have hired thugs, where they're training them, where they're nationalizing them. If we look back in time, the black shirts roamed the Italian countryside, beating up communists. The brown shirts staged violent rallies throughout Germany. We are seeing the same thing here, and this is all controlled by DHS. Set up an internal surveillance system. NSA spying using internet and phone systems. In a closed society, this surveillance is cast as being about national security. The true function is to keep citizens docile and inhibit the activism and dissent. We are seeing this right now. We have seen all 4 of these steps. It is all coming true. Harass citizens groups. You infiltrate and harass citizen groups. The American Civil Liberties Union reports that thousands of ordinary Americans, anti-war, environmental, and other groups have been infiltrated by agents. A secret Pentagon database includes more than 4 dozen peaceful anti-war meetings, rallies, or marches by American citizens in its category of 1,500 suspicious incidents. 6. Engage in arbitrary detention and release. This scares people. It is a kind of cat and mouse game. In closing or closed society, there is a list of dissidents and opposition leaders. You are targeted in this way. Once you're on the list, you can't get off. Have we seen this? Yes, TSA has it. We don't know how this list is created, and there are other lists that we don't even know about, which they're creating right now. A lot of people call it the red list. Number 7, target key individuals, constitutionalists, journalists, bloggers, certain religious groups, patriots, preppers, anti-government people, sovereign citizens. We are seeing this right now. They are doing this. So far, steps 1 through 7 we have seen already. They are actually closing down the society. Number 8, control the press. Over time in closing society, real news is supplanted by fake news and false documents. You won't have a shutdown of news in modern America. It's not possible. But you can have, as Frank Rich and Sidney Blumenthal have pointed out, a steady stream of lies polluting the news well. What you already have is a White House directing a stream of false information that is so relentless that it is increasingly hard to sort out the truth from the untruth. In a fascist system, it's not the lies that count, but the muddying of the information. When citizens can't tell the real news from the fake, they give up their demands for accountability, bit by bit. Have we been seeing this? We've seen the fake news out there. Russia's invading Ukraine. Russia has tanks in Ukraine. All false. Russia has shot down a passenger jet, MH17. All false. We've been seeing lie after lie. The unemployment rate is 5.6%. Lie. They're continually doing steps 1 through 8. All match for closing down a society. Number 9. Dissent equals treason. Cast dissent as treason and criticism as espionage. Every closing society does this, just as it elaborates laws that increasingly criminalize certain kinds of speech and expand the definition of spy and traitor. When Congress wrongly, foolishly passed the Military Commission Act of 2006 and the NDAA and the Patriot Act, guess what? The President now has the power to call any U.S. citizen an enemy combatant, a domestic terrorist, without due process. He has the power to define what any enemy combatant means. The President can also delegate to anyone he chooses in the executive branch the right to define enemy combatant any way he or she wants and then seize Americans accordingly. Number 9, we need to add this. Yes, we have seen this here in the United States. To close down the society. Number 10, the last one. This is the one we are on. Suspend the rule of law. Actually, we are starting to see this. President Obama is writing laws that are not approved by the Congress. He's just doing whatever he wants. What is the suspension of the rule of law? It is martial law, where someone dictates the law to you. The President may now use military troops as a domestic police force in response to a natural disaster, a disease outbreak, terrorist attack, or any other condition. Well, they have this all set up. The military will not do this. DHS will, with the nationalized police force. Critics see this as a clear violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. But guess what? They've created their own police force, which they're nationalizing. These are the thugs. So we can see right now the federal government is going to use some form of military for domestic law enforcement. It also violates the very reason the founders set up our system of government as they did, where you cannot have the executive branch control the military here on the domestic, in the country, domestically. So what we're seeing is we are left with only number 10. The rest have been done. Even the control of information, of news. They're trying to stop the internet information with cyber laws, with CISPA or CISA, or the same law that the President created but called it a different name. They're trying to break down on this. They're trying to control the internet by making it a public utility. This is what's in process right now. So basically, we're at number 10, martial law. Once they do this, our society has been closed down. And they are very, very close. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.